Hello again and welcome back. In today's lesson, we'll start writing some code. We'll be discussing events and how to handle those that occur within your applications when writing code. Now we'll write a code, simple code, by just setting properties at runtime for the controls on our forms. We'll add more of the C# language as the lessons go on. So Visual C# 2005 Express Edition helps you create event-driven programs. An event could be a program started, or a user clicked a button, or that the user types a particular key on the keyboard, or the number of interactions between your program or anything outside that program. So basically, an event-driven program means your applications will respond to an event. Windows can also send commands to your application like shutdown or a message like data coming from the internet to be processed. So actually there are many events that your application can react to. There's a lot more to events than I'm describing, but we'll discuss these at a later date. So we'll have a look at the Hello World application from Lesson 1 and discuss the code we created to display a message on the message box on the screen. If you remember, we double-clicked on the button that we added to the form, and once we did this, the code view appeared. When we double-clicked on the button, an event handler was created for us. The event handler is the definition of the code block that would be performed whenever that event was triggered. So here, the event is given a default name, button 1, as well as some other words that are on the same line. Then we have two curly braces under that line, within which we have to write the code. So when the end user clicks a button, it will begin the event which will start off the code, and this is defined by the event handler. It gives this actual event a name, which is button1 click underscore. Now in C#, the curly braces define a block of code that work together to complete a task. Here, the task is to handle the button on click event, or it is used to organize code. When you scroll through this code view, you can see the other lines of code available. You'll also notice more sets of curly braces. The code view actually lets you roll up and expand the code blocks. And they have names such as namespace and one underneath the class. You'll also note that some code blocks can own others, and they are all defined by indentation and curly braces. So now we must make a mental note that when we write code, we have to type inside these curly braces, especially ones for our particular event handler. So remember, a code block is anything between two sets of curly braces. The other thing that's important to mention is that every line of code we write has to end with a semicolon. Some lines of code may not have a semicolon, but that's because it defines a code block called an event handler. So within your application, events happen and you write your applications to respond to those events. Events may come from various sources. You respond to events by writing code within a code block called an event handler. A code block is defined by curly braces, and each code block is given a certain name. Here the name is button1 underscore. So we've called this code block an event handler. However, event handler is more of a general structure which is called a method. It's something we'll be talking about in lesson 6. But it's an important building block, so it's good to become familiar with the term from now on. So anyway, back to event handlers. As mentioned before, there are hundreds of possible events that we can write code to handle, but how do we know what other events are available to us? In Visual C# 2005 Express Edition, there are 3 ways in which a certain object can respond to an event, and then create an event handler for it. The first way was to double-click on the object in the design view. In the case of the button, the default event handler is a click event, so each control in the default event will depend on what makes sense for that particular control. Generally, the default event is one of the events that you'll want to handle, like a click event. Now if there's an event that's not the default event, best thing to do is to go back to the design view and go to the properties window for the given control, then select a little events icon which looks like a thunderbolt. Click on that and a list of all the possible events that can be triggered for this particular control appears. These are also in groups such as action, appearance, behavior, etc. Now if we wanted to respond to a leave command, we would double click the entry in the property window and an event handler that was created automatically appears called button1_leave. Now let's look at all the properties in the design view. We can decide if we want to handle any events for any given control. So we might not want to handle any events for labels, and if someone clicks on them we can ignore any type of event that happens. But we can also handle each and every event that's on here. Generally, you'll probably only handle one event. Sometimes you may be dragging and dropping or working with resizing or repainting of the form. There may be 6 or 12 events that you want to handle for a single control, but that is very high. So that is something you might need to concentrate on. Sometimes you may need to work with an event that is different than the default event, and that's available to you by double-clicking on the given control. The third way to create an event handler is by typing them in ourselves. It's very simple. Basically, Visual C# 2005 Express Edition does it for you without any errors. And this is basically to speed up the process of writing applications. So now let's write something within those event handlers. In the last lesson we discussed how to adjust the properties of an object, like the control, using the properties window, and how this is just a shortcut to actually writing the code ourselves. This time we'll start writing code on our event handlers ourselves, and that will change the property of an object on our form. We'll take control rather than letting Visual C# do it for us. So create new project and call it lesson 03. And click OK. And we'll keep the example simple. Go to Toolbox, find the text box, drag it to my designer surface, and find a button and put that on the designer surface too. Then I want to click the button and change the property of the text box. So when I change it, I can put a new message inside that text box. So double click the button and get the default event handler and then type some code. So to reference that control, we need to use its name. As you know, each control is given a name by default. The first button 1 of the form is named button 1, then button 2, etc. Same with the text box 1, text box 2, etc. And if we want, we can rename these properties using the properties window. But we'll leave the default name as it is and work with text box 1. So double click, go to my event handler, then reference text box 1, text box. Then I want to reference the text property, so I'll use the period on the keyboard. So type the word text, spacebar, then set that property equal to hello world. And end of line character. And I'll discuss why we wrap the hello world in speech marks in the next lesson. Now we'll run our application to see if it works. So when we click the button, hello world shows up. We've basically changed the property of the text box and we've set the text property equal to hello world. So if we reference the name of the object using the dot notation and type in the property name, then set it equal to the correct value for the given property, we change any property on our text box. We'll now look at how Visual C# helps you when writing code. So we'll retype this line and discuss what was happening whilst I was typing this line of code. Now when I typed text box 1, a small window came up. This is called IntelliSense. And there's two ways that this helps you. First, it acts as a visual reminder of the names of the items you may refer to when writing code. If I forgot the name of my text box whilst writing this code, then this would be a visual reminder. So, as I type, the options focus more on what I'm typing. The up and down arrow keys on the keyboard can be used to go through this really long list and see all the items that are available to me. The other benefit of IntelliSense is that when I find what I'm looking for, I don't need to type out the whole word. I just need to select the next ending character, and in this case it's a period. That basically finishes the word, so there's no need for me to type it all out. This also provides me with a list of all the properties and the methods and events. So if I put the word period, it's highlighted text box 1 and completed the word for me. So the benefit of using IntelliSense is that my typing time reduces as it predicts and types out the words for me, and I don't have so many spelling mistakes. So now it'll bring me to the default property for that given control. So I can look at all the properties, methods and events. And to differentiate each control, you can see the events have the Thunderbolt icon. Methods have little moving boxes, and properties have little pointing fingers to a piece of information on the form. But we'll just be dealing with properties for now. In the yellow message box on the right, there is some help given as to what that property or method or event is. So it's a small reminder of what it does. It gets or sets the current text in the text box. Next, I'll use my spacebar with the equal button, and I can type in the rest of this line of code. And when you get comfortable with IntelliSense, you'll see just how much it reduces the amount that you have to type. It also increases the accuracy of your code. But you have to be able to touch type and look at the screen simultaneously. Before we start writing some code, let's discuss some good habits first. One of the best habits to get into is to comment your code. This basically describes what a section of code is attempting to accomplish. So you need to make your comments clear and easy to understand, as these remind you of your thought process or the reason that the session coding exists. Basically, comments are there to help you or anyone else who works on this program to remind what you're attempting to do. They won't get compiled in your program or make your application larger. There are two ways to create comment. One is to use 2 backslashes and type your comment. The other way is to use a backslash and then use an asterisk. Then I'll just show you that this is a multi-line comment by using the Enter key several times on my keyboard. To end the multi-line comment, I'll put an asterisk and one last backslash. So to start a multi-line comment, you will use backslash asterisk, and then to stop it, you'll use asterisk backslash. Because this is a multi-line, you can type any comment you want. Also, the comments are a lighter shade of grey, and this tells you that they don't have any impact on your application. It's easy to forget to write comments, especially when you first start out, but you'll find it'll make your life a lot simpler to read through well-written comments and then try to understand what the code is doing, rather than having to interpret what the code is actually attempting to do by reading the code line by line. So we'll just look at a few more features. You need to be comfortable with this, as you'll be doing most of your work in this area. If you recall, we spoke about how in the code view you can collapse and expand code blocks using the plus and minus buttons. This is useful if you don't want everything visible at the same time. Now what you can do is create little regions which enable you to group together different methods, which may have a common purpose or goal. It's also possible to create a region inside a method like our event handler code in order to organize long passages of code. This way it's easier to find what you're looking for. So to create your own region, go to Code View and use the # and type in the word region, and then use a space and give this region a name. And then end region. Then you can type in whatever you want, any comment. So then click the -sign to collapse this area. You'll see there's a little box around our region, and if you hover your cursor over this, it gives a synopsis of the code that's located within that region. Then, by clicking the plus button, we can expand it again. So this is how we can hide or reveal passages of code that could take up a lot of visual space on the screen. So while we're looking for other code, you can just hide it or give it a title. Again, going back to comments, if you had a question whilst coding and you found the answer and it applies to the application you're on, maybe you found an MSDN article that you'd like to remind yourself of when you come back to this point in your code, what you can do is add a hyperlink in your comments. So type in an address in your multi-line . So to follow this hyperlink, you just need to hold down the control button and then click the link in your source code, and a web browser opens up and takes you to that website. And that's great, and it comes in very handy when you're trying to document exactly what you're doing. You can also put on any online documentation for other developers who are working on the same project as yourself. So these are just a few things which will help you code faster and to help you find and understand your existing code and to organize your code. So thank you once again for tuning in, and we'll look at more of these in the next lesson. So once again, do take care and bye bye.